Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today, we'll be discussing how Christians are being impacted due to Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. Warm welcome to the program. I have two special guests joining me today. One is all the way from Atlanta in the United States, together with the other guest is from Dorset, England. So Josh, Youssef, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Middle East Report again, and together with Tim Osmond, the UK ambassador for Help The Persecuted. So it's can I just say from the start, it's always a privilege to have you both on the program to discuss the incredible work you are doing for the Lord in the Middle East with our fellow brothers and sisters who are being persecuted for their faith. And for me, it's such an honour and privilege to have you both on the programme. And it's good to see you again, Josh. But Josh, do you want to just share and remind our viewers of how the Lord's given you this incredible vision that we've been doing for a number of years on this program, and each year that you come on, the ministry grows and grows and grows, which really does show that it's bearing incredible fruit in helping our fellow Christians who are being persecuted in the Middle East because of their faith in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, look, it's hard for us in the West to understand the degree to which the rest of the church is being persecuted. Okay, so Christianity is the most persecuted religion in the world today. And when we say that to Americans or Brits or Canadians or Australians, they kind of glaze over, like, how is this possible? It's because it's not happening to us in the West that we don't understand this, but it is happening in the East and in the Far East. And so within the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia, you are dealing with high rates of persecution, severe persecution, especially for those who have left their religion of Islam. They end up experiencing the highest degree of persecution. And that is just a fact. And that's why we do what we do.
Excellent. And Tim, it's great to see you back on the programme. And congratulations in order, because you've been the UK ambassador for Help The Persecuted now for over 5 years, half a decade. Just share with us how you and the ministry have grown in those past 5 years.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Simon. And it's always a pleasure to be here and to be asked to be on the programme, especially with Josh. And 5 years, where has the time gone? You know, when I think back to 2019, July, when Josh and Alan asked me to come on board, and I had no idea what I was getting into, but I just had so much peace about this. I felt, Lord, this is what He wanted me to do. And since then, it's been an amazing journey, understanding what real persecution is, what it means to be persecuted for following Jesus Christ in the Middle East, because I hadn't really understood before. And so we started off, and I remember in 2019, I think it was October, that Marika and I, we went out to Jordan, to see our head office, and we went and met the team, and they took us out to sit down with people who we'd rescued, mainly those that had come down from Iraq, who had been, persecuted and kicked out of their towns and centres, cities by ISIS. And we sat down with people and we heard their story. We heard stories of, persecution then, severe persecution, and they had nothing. We sat on cushions on the floor. Such an impact on me. We heard from people who had come down from Iraq and found their faith in Jordan. Josh shared at the weekend, as we had one guy who had a sort of like a liquor store in one of the places up in northern Iraq, in Bartella. And when ISIS came, he had to flee with his family, and they came down to Jordan. And the first thing that ISIS did was just destroyed every single thing in his home, burnt it out. And he came down and came to church and didn't really want to, but the Lord got him, and found his faith in Christ, you know. And he said to Josh, he said, Josh said, so how, what about this story? He said, well, I really have to thank God for ISIS. And I remember Josh saying, he said, sorry, he just thought the guy's English wasn't very good, you know.
I can imagine, yeah.
And he said, no, I have to thank God for ISIS, because otherwise I'd still be back there peddling liquor and drugs and cigarettes and things. And he was just, I always remember this smile on his face, you know. And he turned his church, his home, we refurbished it, and he turned it into a church. And the first church service, there was over 100 people there. Unfortunately, he couldn't go back. They weren't able to go back to Iraq. But I'll never forget that, you know. And other stories, you know, that I've shared on this program since. And I look back to 2019, and we did our first program here. I think it was December. Was it December 2019? And it's been such a blessing. And that's a real blessing, because your viewers, you know, we've had some amazing comments from them. Oh, I saw you on Simon's program, Middle East Report, and
that's very kind, but it's the Lord's program, so I'm never going to say this is my program. It belongs to him, okay?
It's the Lord's program.
I'm just the vessel for
it.
it.
So there's been some amazing times we've had here, and here we are 5 years later.
Amazing.
Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure partnering with you both. So let's have a look really at the incredible overview that is Help the Persecuted, and this is their vision for helping persecuted Christians in the Middle East today.
Imagine facing torture and death for just 5 words. I believe in Jesus Christ. This is the day-to-day reality for hundreds of millions of Christians across the globe. Christians in hostile regions often face physical violence towards themselves or their loved ones. They lose their homes, their jobs, all because of their faith in Jesus. The theme of God's rescue and restoration of His children is painted across all of Scripture, and Scripture demands that we take a part. Their burdens are not meant to be carried alone. Help the Persecuted's mission is to rescue persecuted believers from life-threatening danger, restore their physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, and rebuild their lives on firm foundations, namely Jesus Christ. When lives hang in the balance, every minute counts. That's why we have embedded field teams across the Middle East and North Africa who can provide help at a moment's notice. Our teams work closely with trusted partners to identify and assess the needs of the persecuted church, tailoring packages of support based on each person's specific needs, such as offering immediate funds when they're in imminent danger, safe housing and living expenses to help get their feet back on the ground, critical medications they may no longer have access to, trauma counseling, seed money for a new business, and much, much more. By rescuing these lives and restoring hope, Help the Persecuted is ultimately rebuilding firm foundations, both physically and spiritually, and empowering the persecuted believer. Help the Persecuted has supported over 100,000 persecuted Christians across the Middle East and North Africa. Each one of those persecuted believers has a face, a life, a family, a story. Help the Persecuted's ultimate goal is to see a flourishing church body in the midst of the Muslim world and beyond. We have plans to grow our teams into Iran and deeper into Central Asia, reaching more persecuted believers in these hostile regions. We long to partner with the body of Christ in the West to carry the burdens of those facing such great persecution and opposition because of their faith in Jesus. Together, we can help rescue more persecuted Christians on the front lines, restoring hope and rebuilding lives.
And incredible to think that Help the Persecuted was birthed after the horrors of ISIS and the atrocities committed by ISIS over 10 years ago, back in 2014. Josh, a great overview, an incredible vision the Lord has given you both regarding the ministry. But can you share with us how important it is for you? I know that the headquarters are based in the United States, you're based in Atlanta in the South, those southern states in America, but share with us the importance of having a UK arm to help the persecuted, and particularly to have Tim on board as your UK ambassador.
Well, it's great to have a location closer to the Middle East than Atlanta, and so London has really served as a springboard for that. It's also been great to have under Tim's leadership the ability to raise funds and to help support the work that's happening within the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia. So London has become a very critical component to that. And at a smaller level, we've even had some folks who have come, have had to have fled their countries in the Middle East to come here, that we have helped set up here. And this is a great place to do that. We don't like moving people out of their country or their region because we want to see the church have a witness. We don't want to see the church emptied of its witness in the Middle East and North Africa and Asia. So we like for them to stay, but there are cases where we've had to bring somebody to Europe or the United States where they were under real threat of death.
That's excellent. And Tim, I've got some latest figures here, which is incredible. So you've just informed me this morning that Help The Persecuted, through God's help, has been able to help over 82,000 people. I think this year alone. And HTP now, Help The Persecuted, is operating in 13 countries, and that includes war-torn Libya. So just share with us how the ministry has grown, how it's expanded, and how it's having a bigger impact from those few countries that you started, was it 6 years ago?
Yeah, well, I mean, you saw the overview video, and within that, Josh shares how we wanted to expand into other countries within the Middle East and Asia and North Africa. So 13 countries, so we've done that. We're in Turkey and Iran. We helped, as you know, over 750 people come out of Afghanistan. We are now present in Pakistan, Yemen, right across North Africa, and the newest or the most recent country that we've gone into, which very much has been on Josh's heart for a number of years, is Libya. We have, I call them an operative, but it's a team member actually on the ground in Libya. We had our first case where we were able to get someone out of a Christian, persecuted Christian, out of prison. So it's just phenomenal how this is growing. And I think the key to this is the prayer, and God actually leading us into the countries He wants us to go to. And as you know, the most important part of our ministry is to have indigenous teams on the ground. So local teams that speak the language, they understand the religious and political climate. And quite a number of them, high percentage of them, are actually former MBBs themselves. That's Muslim background believers.
And quite incredible in Libya, considering it's a war-torn country, and the country fell apart with the Arab Spring, with the overthrow of Gaddafi. Then the warlords were in control of the country. So to have representatives there and to see God moving in that country is quite something.
Well, I mean, I have to say, when we started to look at it, the doors came off the hinges when we were inquiring about going in. It was divine appointments, and literally, it was fantastic.
I've been doing ministry into the Middle East for 23 years, and at every conference, at every meeting, at every large gathering, people would say, why don't we have response from Libya? Where are the Christians in Libya? No emails, no communication, because I was involved in media into that part of the world. And it was a vortex. Nobody could seem to figure out where the Christian population was, or if there was a Christian population. And now we actually have boots on the ground to actually look and see what the Lord is doing amongst the church. And it is small, but it is growing.
Wow.
And this is a very exciting time.
So, Josh, for our viewers, I think this is very, very important to unpack, really. And in the sense, when we look at God moving in the world, we have to focus on the Middle East. But show us why you think that God is revealing himself through dreams and visions to Muslims right across North Africa, right across the Middle East right now, and particularly the epicenter of this, which is currently in Iran, where so many believers are coming to faith in Iran with dreams and vision. And even talk about how they've even been having dreams and visions in Gaza as well. So show us what the Lord is really doing across the region and the Middle East, and literally working his supernatural Holy Spirit power in that region.
No, it's undeniable what is happening. The number of Muslim people that are having some sort of dream or vision, whatever you want to call it, of what I believe some sort of something that's pointing them towards Jesus and towards the Scriptures, is unprecedented. And if you look back at church history, you don't see any movements like this. So really from about the early 1980s to today, more Muslims have come to faith in Jesus Christ in that time period than in the 1400 years since Islam, since Muhammad had his visions.
Wow.
And so, and this is a lot of it is driven by this dreams and visions phenomena. But we then see, as a result of that, a greater degree of persecution. But the church is growing in places where the church was once thriving at the early church. You know, you had churches all throughout Egypt, Libya, all throughout North Africa and the Middle East that were then taken over or destroyed by Islam. Now these churches are growing up amongst Muslims in home churches, small gatherings, even some large churches. That, you know, when I talk to pastors in Iraq, for instance, they say in the 1960s, they never saw a Muslim background person in their congregation. Today, they could be 40, 50% Muslim background in their congregation.
That's incredible, isn't it? Yeah. Amazing. Such a privilege. And Tim, just share with us from your personal perspective, what it's actually like to work with these persecuted Christians, particularly those that have come from the Islamic faith and accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Saviour. What it's like to work with these people, and what have you learned from them?
Well, as I said before, it's extraordinary, you know, to actually go out and sit with them and hear their stories and understand their faith. They have this real joy of the Lord, you know, which is unshakable. You know, and I've been privileged enough to go to Jordan a few times and Lebanon, you know, and go into safe houses and speak with those that we've rescued, you know, emergency, very, very urgent. Sit down with them, their families are hunting them down, and to understand their story and how they heard about this person of Jesus Christ, you know, and what it means to them. And a lot of them are talking about darkness and light, you know, oh, we were in the darkness and now we're in the light. And what I say for me and my faith has grown so much over these 5 years, and it's kept me humble, and it's kept my feet firmly on the ground. You know, to work with these amazing guys, you know, Josh and Alan, and see the teams on the ground who are actually at the coalface. You know, they're the ones that are out putting their lives on the line. You know, I have the easy bit, really. I'm in the UK, you know, I can talk about it, but they're out there every single day. And they have families, you know, themselves, but they go into areas which are very dark, and they'll go and take the gospel. You know, we have a pastoral care team, and they go out in Lebanon, they'll go to the Druze community, they'll go to the Muslim community, you know, and they'll just start by family, by family, by family. And it's just phenomenal to see. It's such a privilege for me to work there, and I never want to leave when I have to leave. You know, I want to, because it's tangible. You know, what Josh was just saying there is what we're witnessing is a tangible move of God throughout the Muslim community in these Islamic nations, which are so difficult to, you know, share the gospel in. You know, he's doing it, and then we're picking up those that have come to know him, come from the darkness into the light.
Exciting,
it's phenomenal. It's
amazing.
exciting,
Amazing.
Very exciting.
And Josh, we have to put obviously today's episode in the context of October the 7th and discussing the biggest mass terrorist attack in Israel's history on October the 7th. This was also the largest number of Jewish people that were massacred since the Holocaust in the Second World War. And of course, as a response, the Israelis have launched a ground offensive against Hamas in Gaza. Share with us how Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza is impacting on the work of Help the Persecuted within the Middle East.
Well, first I'd like to make a comment that the MBB community, the Muslim background community that has suffered under persecution, they understand what took place on October 7th. Many of them do, because the dehumanizing that took place on that day, where Palestinians came in and dehumanized these Israeli hostages and people that they killed, that is what an MBB experiences on a daily basis, that dehumanizing. The fact that they're considered unclean, kafir, they cannot be touched, they must be killed if they don't come back. So that is something that I think the MBB community understands really well. But in terms of the broader conflict, what we're seeing is this volley of missiles back and forth between northern Israeli positions and southern Lebanese. Those who live in that southern Lebanon portion don't want to be caught up in this, okay? Whether you're a Christian background Lebanese or whether you are a convert or a Druze. The Druze have actually publicly come out in favor of Israel and stated their support of Israel. The whole Druze community in Lebanon, which has created a whole dynamic between the Christians, the Druze, and the Muslims.
Because before, if I can just add there, the Druze are very loyal to whatever country they're in. So there's a big Jewish community, and I've met loads of them in Israel, and they're loyal to Israel. The Jews in Syria have always been loyal to Syria. And of course, the Jews in Lebanon have always been loyal to the...
They have, and that's what makes this so interesting, is these in Lebanon are actually saying, no, we support our Druze brothers and sisters in Israel.
Wow, that's significant.
So, this is a complex situation. I mean, very complicated. But they've always been against Hezbollah. And I think that anger towards Hezbollah is probably driving their desire to support Druze in Israel.
Excellent. So let's have a look at this latest video produced by Help the Persecuted that looks at how Help the Persecuted is helping Christians caught up in a potential conflict in southern Lebanon between Israel and the Iranian-backed proxy terrorist organization, Hezbollah.
As the war in the Middle East intensifies, many Christian families in Lebanon are fleeing the fighting on the southern border with Israel. In response, Christian charity Help the Persecuted is providing a respite for those who have been displaced in their refuge centre and safe houses in North Lebanon. When Manal and her family found themselves caught in the crossfire between Hezbollah and Israel near their home right on the southern border, she and her two daughters were evacuated to this Help the Persecuted refuge centre. Manal says they were overwhelmed by the support they received there.
كنا كتير مرتاحين أول شيء باستقبالهم لنا قعدنا كانوا يعني كيف بدي أقول لك كل حاولوا قد ما فيهم وأكثر مما فيهم يأمنوا لنا كل وسائل الراحة من تدفئة أكل الشباب ما قصروا الإخوة ما قصروا بيروحوا بيجوا شو بدنا بيسألونا وهيك وكل شيء كان مأملنا هون يعني حسينا بحالنا ببيتنا ومثل ما بيقولوا أكتر يعني كانوا محوطيننا بكل شيء حلو بكل شيء منيح الحمد لله.
Behind me is the eastern border with Israel. We're hearing explosions as we speak. In the southern border, where most of the fighting is happening, we're going to be hearing the story of churches that have completely closed and have helped families like Manal's get to safe shelter through the support of Help the Persecuted. We're going to visit the home now of her pastor to hear more about that story.
عين دارة استقبلهم القسيس أمل هونيك. أمل أولادها بيجوا لعنا على مدرسة الأحد ومن هني وصغار هني دايما وأهلهم بيشجعوهم يجوا على مدرسة الأحد.
As well as receiving a safe shelter for families like Manal's, Help the Persecuted is also providing spiritual and emotional support to those traumatized by the war and persecution. They're also delivering emergency relief packs to displaced families and providing medical supplies and food packages. And Manal shared her hopes for returning home soon.
كتير صعب لا لا، مشتاقين لكل شيء، من القعدة للجمعة للعائلة. كتير صعب انك تترك بيتك وتفل، واكتر عن هيك الاهل، اصحاب، كنيستك، حياتك، بيئتك، صعب صعب. يعني عنا امل بالرب انه نرجع كنا على العيد نعيد هونيك، بس صعب. ان شاء الله بهالعيد الجاي يسوع يزرع السلام ونرجع على بيوتنا بعد العيد، أو على العيد نعيد ببيوتنا، نكون بين أهلنا وأصحابنا إن شاء الله.
So as families like Manal's remain desperate to return to their homes, it's hoped everyone who receives support from Help the Persecuted will experience the true hope and peace of Christ at this time. And to find out more, go to htp.org.
Great report there by Peter Wooding, who risked his life to bring that report to us. So well done, Peter, you're doing a great job. I have to ask you, Tim, now we know that Israel is on the verge of mopping up its military operations against Hamas in Gaza. Israel's facing the last kind of battalions in Rafah, with a lot of speculation now that the war is going to shift to the north as Hezbollah have intensified their rockets and missiles. But isn't there now a danger that the Iranian regime has said that any Israeli attack on Hezbollah will lead to a full-scale Iranian response on multiple fronts that could develop into a regional war? Share with us how the Christians are concerned that they could get caught up not only with a war against Israel and Hezbollah, but also a war between Israel and Iran and other Sunni and Shiite states.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the situation is like a tinderbox, as we all know, and it seems to, the tit for tat that's been going on since October the 7th could suddenly escalate. We know what comes out of Iran. There's always lots of threats, you know, and they know how strong Israel is as well. But when you think of the resources that Israel has, and then the resources that, you know, Hezbollah has, Syria has, and all the other Islamic nations, it will be by divine appointment that saves Israel. The Christians in Lebanon, as we know, are fleeing from the south already. They've been displaced from their homes, and they're fleeing north. And that's nominal Christians, that they are also persecuted Christians. They're having to flee. And so you saw in the program our refugee centre, and many of them have come to our refugee centre. Some stay for a long time, others stay for a short period of time before moving on. And it's serving really well. And we believe that this refuge centre is really a beacon of hope. And we have a pastoral care team that comes alongside them of up to 15 volunteers who are trained. And so it's actually worked. You know, the paint wasn't even dry, and we had our first family there, you know, who were an Iranian family that had fled Iran because of persecution from there. They had ended up in southern Lebanon, and a rocket had destroyed their home from Hezbollah, in actual fact, within. So it didn't actually make it over the fence. It destroyed their home. Luckily, they weren't in it. And they ended up coming to our refuge centre and getting so much help. And this is what's happening with the Christians that are coming up. And when the war, I always say it's not a case of if, but when, you know, as we all know. And how that's going to escalate, we're not sure. But we have put into place plans to actually take on another refuge centre if we need. And one of the other things we did was to double the size of our farm. You know, your viewers would have seen the Seeds of Hope Farm 1, you know, which had huge impact on the local Druze and Muslim community, and also downtown Beirut. So we've doubled the size of that in preparation for famine when war comes. And we'll just look after the Christians as much as we can that are coming up. But it's one of those, we're not quite sure really what's going to happen. No one can really predict how deep it will go in, how large the scale's going to be. But we just know that the Lord will look after his own. And, they are so resilient, especially those that have been persecuted, as Josh had already said. They have a strength, an inner strength. They've been persecuted. They know what it's like, and they're very, very strong.
Yeah. And Josh, please outline for us the precarious situation facing the Christians in Southern Lebanon in particular, who are under that influence and jurisdiction of Hezbollah.
If you're a Lebanese Christian, you are not in support of Hezbollah, but you're also not wanting war. Many people, the older community, the older population particularly, remember the Civil War and how devastating that was. And so many of them do not want another one of those civil wars. So I do think they're in a very difficult spot because much of the Christian population has left Lebanon over the last 30, 40 years. I mean, you look, at one point Lebanon, I think, was 70% Christian. Today, I think it's less than 30%. So it's been emptied of that, of their power in many respects. And so they don't want a civil war. They're weak. But I also think that there is a bright spot here in that Hezbollah is probably looking at what happened to Gaza, and they're thinking, that is not going to be good for us. If Israel does what they did to Gaza here in southern Lebanon, that's the end of Hezbollah. And so Iran is probably kind of looking at a different administration, United States administration, which could impact their ability to support. And therefore, Hezbollah is going to play it kind of loose. And so this could go a whole different direction than what we think it could. But we don't know the future.
That's very true. The Lord does. So let's have a look at this excellent CBN news report looking at the plight of Christians living in the shadow of the threat posed by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon.
It's a scene that has played out each year since 1890, when St. George's Church opened its doors here in the hills of South Lebanon. Lebanese Christians taking part in the Good Friday procession, carrying a cross with a Jesus Christ statue through the town of Klea. This year was no different.
Our Christian ancestors here faced war, and they never abandoned their land or their faith. They stood fast against all adversities, and we're going to do the same, because that's the spirit we inherited from them.
Klea and more than a dozen other Christian villages sit near the border with Israel. On October 8th, when Hezbollah started launching rockets at Israel in support of the Hamas attacks, Christians here suddenly found themselves caught in a conflict they didn't ask for or want.
Just because one group decided to go to war with Israel, I'm almost 100% sure that all of us are victims of other people's agendas, and we want no part in it.
Since war began in Gaza, the Islamic terror group controlling much of South Lebanon has fired more than 3,000 rockets at Israeli civilian and military targets from area hilltops and villages. Al-Qiyam, a village adjacent to Klea, has felt multiple Israeli rocket and missile strikes during this time.
Al-Qiyam is one of Hezbollah's strongholds, and that's the main reason Israel is targeting that town.
Some 90,000 people from South Lebanon, mostly Christians, evacuated to the north after Hezbollah started launching their rockets. Among those staying, Christian entrepreneur George Salame, forced to close his carpentry business due to constant shelling.
We thought the war would end in 10 or 15 days, but it's kept going on, and most of the businesses in the villages got affected. And now because of this, we have no income.
Here in Klea and other small Christian villages that dot the South Lebanon landscape, the big concern now is that Hezbollah could potentially come into their communities and use their neighborhoods in order to launch missile attacks against Israel.
What scares us the most is if Hezbollah starts firing recklessly. For example, last week, they fired missiles at Israel, and most of their missiles didn't reach their targets, and they fell short hitting Lebanese towns. One of those missiles landed in the Christian village of Marjayun.
Christians used to be the majority in the south, not anymore. Their numbers have slowly dwindled since Hezbollah moved in.
The situation for Christians, not only here in the south, but the whole country, has been dismal, and there's no stability, and because of this, there's a lot of Christian migration, mostly from the south.
Daher, a Christian who's reported on here for more than 30 years, fears this latest crisis will spark an even larger exodus.
Honestly, people here don't dream anymore. We had a lot of dreams when we were young. We had dreams of living in peace and comfort. We worked hard for it, but the years proved us wrong, and all our dreams have evaporated.
Father Pierre tells CBN News that despite being caught between Hezbollah and Israel, the Christians of South Lebanon will continue to preach a message of hope and peace.
We're the peacemakers. Our Lord Jesus Christ told us to pray for our enemies, and that's why we're not going to stop praying. Our God can remove this dark cloud, and He's able to change and soften hearts and bring peace to our area.
Excellent report, as always, by friends at CBN, which is also interesting to give a different perspective, a Christian perspective, of the prospect of a war between Israel and Hezbollah and how they will be impacted. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, Tim, about the Seeds for Hope farming project, and we've done a program looking at the kind of amazing. We all like coffee. We've got coffees here, the amazing little coffee shop that's in Southern Lebanon, or what you're doing in Barrett with this food program. But is there a serious concern that if there is a major escalation or war between Israel and Hezbollah, then what we could see is potentially Lebanon go into a situation where there is a very serious threat of a famine, not only of loss of human life, but also a famine as well. So how important is it that as a ministry that you're thinking ahead for all types of possible scenarios, including a major war?
Well, it's very important, and with the political and economical situation in Lebanon at the moment, as you know, people just cannot afford to eat, and that was even before any of this started, before the war started. And in response to that, our Seeds of Hope Farm 1 was birthed, with 11 super polytunnels, I call them, greenhouses. They're like commercial grade, and we've had videos on here of me and Josh and the team up there, at this farm feeding. I think that day we went was 450 meals, and they did that once a month to the Druze and the Muslim community. So it's planting this seed, and then you can feed them and share the gospel. And so really from that, when the team got together to pray for a response to this war, we felt as though one was the Refuge Centre and two was to double the size of the farm, because people cannot eat anyway. They can't afford to eat. And a lot of the food is cleaned with contaminated water. Up at the farm we have a well, and we have pure water that's coming out from that. So not only are you getting organic food, but you're getting it washed properly, and it's very, very clean. So we work with the churches in downtown Beirut and give it to the needy and those that can't get out of their homes and the vulnerable. And it was just amazing to witness that. So with this new farm, we're getting ready for an escalation, because as you know, with war comes famine. And if we can have food being produced in 2 farms, and I think there's something like 31 great big polytunnels now, where we can actually feed thousands, and this is going to be Christians and, local communities, and to be able to share that gospel with them where they don't have hope at the moment. And so their hope is going to be even worse, their lives are going to be even worse when war comes. And they're going to need this. It's so vitally important to also, as we say, to spread the gospel.
And Josh, as Tim was speaking there, what comes to mind is the vision the Lord gave Joseph while he was in Egypt as the kind of prime minister of Egypt, essentially, the number 2 only to Pharaoh, where the Lord gave him that vision, firstly, of a time of incredible prosperity for 7 years and then 7 years of kind of famine. Is it very much like this when you're actually putting in the preparation plans, particularly to extend this incredible Seeds of Hope farm and to extend the farming production? So when war does happen, that you're ready and that you're prepared, and share with us how God's wisdom is at play here.
I love that account in Genesis, and I wouldn't say we had quite the same vision, but we definitely knew something was coming. But prior to the Israeli situation, which I don't think we knew or could have predicted, but what we did know was that Lebanon had the largest influx of immigration of refugees it had ever seen. As a result of the Syrian and Iraqi wars with ISIS. So we knew there was a problem with infrastructure in Lebanon, and we knew that some of that was food security. And so we started this kind of what we called this small Seeds of Hope campaign, which has really grown into something much larger than we ever could have thought. I mean, 50,000 pounds of fruit and veg a month or something like that, I think is what we're producing. And so, when somebody walks up to you in Beirut and says, "If it weren't for you and your farm, I would have starved," it's a very humbling thing. And many of these people, and as I said, the Christian community has really largely evacuated Lebanon over the last, let's say, 50 years. And so there isn't as much infrastructure as used to exist, with the churches being as strong as they used to be in the 40s and 50s and even into the 60s. And so now for us to be able to come in and do this, and we've actually had several organizations kind of come and look at what we did so that they could replicate that in other hillside towns of Lebanon.
Amazing. So let's have a look at the latest update in terms of the Seeds of Hope farm project that's literally feeding thousands in Lebanon.
One of the many most challenging consequences of the current Middle East war is famine. As the fighting began, Christian charity Help The Persecuted immediately initiated plans to double the capacity of their Seeds of Hope farm in Lebanon. Their team is currently adding 19 commercial-grade greenhouses to make sure thousands more will have something to eat as winter sets in across a war zone. Help The Persecuted Lebanon team leader Amin explains more about the urgent need to provide food to families in crisis.
There is much more need for people, because the Lebanese people, I can say that they fell down. They are broken because they have nothing. They have no hope. But thanks God, HTP gave them some hope, even if the hope is little bit. But we need to still and keep going, helping those people.
Seeds of Hope farm engineer Jawad explains how God is working through the farm, not just to feed families practically, but also spiritually.
الله هو اللي بيدفعنا للعمل. الله بيفكر يساعدنا أكتر ويعيننا أكتر ويمسكنا بإيدنا ويعطينا نعمة ورزق أكتر وأوفر بكتير لحتى نقدر نساعد الناس المحتاجة واللي طالبي وشه.
And it's hoped this expansion will enable them to feed at least 1,000 families each month. And to find out more, go to htp.org.
Which just got to say congratulations to Help The Persecuted, because these are incredible projects that are literally saving lives but also bringing the gospel, and this is what we want to see happen in Lebanon. We want Muslims, we want the population of Lebanon to turn to God during this crisis, and that's so important, this particular project. Josh, share with us something about your Enduring Livelihood project that you've got now running through countries such as Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Jordan, and how helping Christians have a livelihood, particularly in the aftermath of the ISIS attacks and the Islamic State, how this is so important to really give Christians that sustainability that they need to actually survive.
We use a phrase a lot of times internally called civic death, this idea that somebody is going to be sort of strangled back to their former religion, and so their driver's license is taken away, their credit cards, their cash, their inheritance, or they're locked in their room. I mean, there's this desire on the part of the former religion to sort of really do everything they can to bring that person back. And so for us, we wanted to get out of this cycle of like safe housing people, putting them into, just constantly supporting them. How do we create a sustainable activity for these people, a work life existence? And so what came out of that was an enduring livelihood program where we would help them establish a business, create a business, build on that, and sustain that business. And what's been really, really neat is to go back and look over the last 6 years and see that over 70% of the businesses that we have helped fund are still cash flow positive today.
Amazing.
And they're not just supporting that immediate family, they're supporting a MBB, Muslim background believing community around them, where they can give jobs to people who are coming out of similar persecution environments. I mean, it's a very unique thing that we've got going.
And Tim, do you want to give us a kind of practical overview of one of such projects in terms of this livelihood project?
Yeah, we've got a guy who I think we've got a video of it. Actual fact, he's a plumber, and he's a refugee, and we helped him set up this business in an undisclosed country. Obviously, we can't say who he is or where he is, and just the joy that they have from being able to be self-sufficient. And this guy's incredible because not only does he kind of give really good rates, but he shares the gospel with all the families and all the people that he goes to do this plumbing work in. It's phenomenal. Yeah.
We could do with more plumbers like that.
Yeah, I know we could. Couldn't we?
Absolutely. And Josh, I mean, when we're talking about the crisis in the Middle East, we have to talk about the kind of Iranian regime, but we also know that despite the darkness and evil of this regime, we are seeing an unprecedented number of Muslims coming to faith in Jesus Christ as their Messiah. So share with us how you've been able to operate and work in this totalitarian, authoritarian regime that is Iran.
Well, it is a very difficult place to do ministry. Having said that, the church is growing in Iran very rapidly. They've just changed the law in Iran that the prison sentence that used to exist, which was 3 years in prison for being a Christian, is now gone from 3 years to 15 years. Oh. So they've elevated that. And they call it treason. So they've gone from sort of apostasy to treason, which took it from 3 years to 15 years in prison, which has certainly put more pressure on the church, but it's also created more fervency in the life of the believer to double down. And many of them, we just found out about 8 that were sentenced to multiple years in jail as a result of that. But our teams still serve and work in large cities and small cities in Iran, very carefully and very quietly, to support those who are facing either jail time or worse.
Amazing. And Tim, you particularly wanted to tell the story about this incredible retreat that's taken place recently in Iraq, organised by Help The Persecuted, in which you've been able to bring Christians from a Muslim background together for a retreat, a conference, time to build them up spiritually and to prepare them for the very hostile climate in which they're living in. Do you want to give us details about how this is pretty much unprecedented in the Middle East?
Yeah, well, we each year we put on a number of retreats, but they've normally been for men and also for separate ones for women. And this was organised by our team in Iraq. And they decided that they wanted to bring them together. So a lot of the men, their wives weren't believers, and they said, "Oh, we don't want to go across to this conference with you." And so the guys were praying fervently. And then there was suddenly you get on the kind of like the day they were going to go, the wife would say, "I think I'm going to come along," and then she'd give her life to the Lord and probably even get baptized at the same time. And so we had this retreat for 100 former MBBs.
Wow.
And our team director in the Middle East, he said, this is probably one of the largest gatherings in an Islamic country of former MBBs. And it was just an incredible, I wish I'd gone, I wish I'd loved to have gone, to have seen this discipleship, this teaching, this gathering, this fellowship of people who didn't know about the other person. They didn't know where they were in Iraq. They just, sometimes they think they're the only people, the only Christians, because they can't share with anybody, it's too dangerous. And so from that, there's been an online church that started, and so more and more people are coming, and they think that next year is going to be probably 150, could even be 200, depending, And I just wanted to read out the impact of I've written it down in actual fact. One of the guys who was interviewed by our director, and he said, "Who is Jesus for you? Why did you accept Jesus? Why is he unique? Why is he better than the other person that you believed in before?" And the response was, "He's my real shepherd. He brought me from darkness to light. He is my life. He is the blood in my veins. He is everything. He transformed me. There is nothing bad in Jesus Christ. Only good comes from him." And this is amazing, the response that they have given, when asked and when questioned about why they follow Jesus and not what they had before, And it's just an extraordinary witness, and it's an extraordinary opportunity of a gathering of these former MBBs.
Excellent. So let's have a look at this incredible gathering of former Muslim believers meeting together in Iraq under the hospitality of Help the Persecuted.
Imagine facing torture and death for just 5 words: "I believe in Jesus Christ." That's the case for many of those who met in Iraq recently, for possibly one of the largest ever gatherings of converts from Islam to Christianity in the Middle East. Nearly 100 converts from a Muslim background came together for an enduring faith conference, a multi-day discipleship intensive hosted by Christian ministry Help the Persecuted. Their field ministry director, Salam, explains why these conferences are so vital for these Christians who face extreme persecution and isolation.
It's a hostile environment for everybody who chooses Jesus in that region. We equip them, for this kind of life and how to share Jesus with others.
Salam shares the remarkable story of one of the persecuted believers who's led several people to Christ as a result of attending one of their previous enduring faith conferences.
The good news is, like, one of the people who attended 2 years ago, within 2 years he brought 12 people to the Lord, and he's bringing them to him to the conference, and actually we're baptizing one after the other. We had 9 baptisms that took place this summer, and we are very glad to see the happiness, the joy on the faces of people. And when they share their testimonies, most of them, they said, "I was living in a cave, in a dark cave, and now I see the light." And I asked, "Who's Jesus for you? What's Jesus? Why did you accept Jesus? Why is he unique?" They said, "He's my real shepherd. He brought me from darkness to light. He's my life. He's the blood that goes in my veins. He's everything. He changed, he transformed me."
And in response to the growing number of converts from Islam to Christianity throughout Iraq, Help the Persecuted is providing ongoing spiritual encouragement through a weekly online church fellowship.
Last year, we started something called online church for those people, because many of them are not churched, because churches do not exist in their areas, and they love to worship together. So we started this meeting every Tuesday night, and people are coming, in groups, like in their homes, just to join and worship together. And also we have communion together. So the Lord is not only leading people, he's leading people to be leaders, to lead others for Christ. Praise the Lord. Thank you. Without your help, nothing like that could be possible.
Peter Wooding reporting for the Global News Alliance.
And if we look at the situation in Iraq 10 years ago with ISIS dominating huge swathes of Iraq, who would have thought that was possible to have a conference and a get-together of former Muslims together who are actually having a retreat because they believe in Jesus Christ? Absolutely extraordinary. We got about 2 minutes 40 left, maybe less than that at the end of the program. I certainly could do another half an hour with you guys. But tell us the prophetic significance of having the first church being established in the ancient city that is Babylon.
Yeah, so out of this conference came a group of about 13 people who said, we want to establish a church in our city of Babel. They're calling it the First Evangelical Church of Babel, which is the heart of what we would consider historic Babylon, right? There's the palaces are there, some of the excavations are still there, and this is very significant. I don't think, and haven't looked at the history, but I don't think there's been an evangelical church in that village, really, since the church, the early church, and the disciples went in their different directions to plant churches in that part of the world. And so this is a very significant move, and they're asking for help. They're asking for a base of operations for them to have people come and worship with them.
Amazing. I think we have to do a whole program on that one. Very quickly, within 30 seconds, Tim, can you explain to our viewers how essential it is to support the incredible ministry that God is working through so powerfully, which is Help the Persecuted?
Well, we can't do this without support and prayer. So please go to hcb.org, sign up for the newsletters, the prayer reports, prayer is so vital. And also, if you are able to give, we'd welcome that as well. We know a lot of you already do, and we thank you for that.
So Tim and Josh, thank you so much for being my guests on today's Middle East Report. I want to thank you for watching this program at home, because it's been a real insight to see what God is doing in the Middle East today, and he's certainly moving. So it's imperative that we support ministries like Help the Persecuted, who are making a massive difference in the lives of our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ in the Middle East today. So thank you for watching today's Middle East Report. Shalom and God bless from us.